Anyway, Piers Corbyn.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, great to be here, and people know this is the Keep Talking group, I guess you know that, which is historical. It's been here for years and years and years, and had the audacity to have anybody speaking, and therefore they've got attacked by everybody else. But you know, it really is very important to have actual discussions on things. So, welcome to everybody. We're sending round up an attendance list so that anyone who puts their names on that can be added to our campaigning, Let the UK Live, daily actions. So if you put your phone number on there, you get a text telling you what's going on. Okay, so first of all then, the climate, what I'm hoping to hear is you're going to get armed on the climate energy con and the fake science, and that'll lead us on to the COVID stuff as well, and breaking the booster jab society. I would just say that now, that there seems to be a creeping thing around the world that you've got to go jab, jab, jab everywhere, and you have a kind of new society of jab people who are subservient to a new world order and have to be jabbed again and again, and be genetically modified as a consequence, and it leads us into a new totally evil technocracy where maybe we're not humans at all. I mean, I just want to say that because it is more evil than you can actually imagine, I think, this stuff. And we have to somehow get that across to people, which is not easy. But when they've got like we've got to have a permanent virus-fighting society, that is fascism. That's what they want, because that's an excuse to control you for everything. So, all right. So the forerunner of it all was, of course, the climate con. So we're going to discuss here a bit about why or how the fact that all their stories about climate fail. Secondly, give you some knowledge on how to argue with the Extinction Rebellion morons who are wasting super glue on motorways. We'll leave out that bit and then talk about the decisive phase in the struggle we're in now and how to win. Okay, so next one please. Does this work? It does work, right. Quick list of things I've done, because you have people saying, Piers, you're not qualified for this and that. It's just a list of a few qualifications and the success of our, see I can walk around now, the success of our long-range forecasts, where I used to test them with William Hill, and made money, 40% money on stakes typically, and then got banned from it by William Hill, who said they couldn't carry on doing this. So I asked them, why did you carry on doing it at all then after 12 years? He said, oh, Mr. Corbyn, Aintree. I said, what do you mean Aintree? He said, look, you give us bets every April about what's going to happen, so that tells us what the going is going to be in Aintree, so we adjust the odds in advance. And you know, a day betting on Aintree, they can make $1 million, which they might lose 10,000 to me in a year. So it was a no-brainer. Anyway, we'd set up a company, got loads of money from insurance companies for a while, done independent peer review testing. Yeah, go on the next one. We've got to speed up. This is taking too long already, isn't it? Anyway, I've done lots of stuff on housing and environment, and we floated on the stock exchange and delisted. Right, so what do you know about the standard assumptions of classical meteorology? It doesn't tell you here, so does anyone want to tell me? Oh, yes, it does. It says weather drives weather. That is standard meteorology. What happened yesterday tells you what's going to happen tomorrow. Well, as a first thing, it is. If you just say the weather tomorrow is going to be like today, it would actually be pretty accurate most of the time. But the problems with that is that after many days, when you predict forward, it doesn't work and it just goes wrong. And the important thing to know about real climate data or weather data is it has signals in it. Obviously, there's an annual signal. If you measure the temperature in Pimlico, it'll go up and down annually. But there's other slower signals or faster signals in it of 155 days, which is connected with solar flares. Or there's 22 years, which is the double sunspot cycle. There's all sorts of things. Now, standard meteorology cannot explain any of those cycles, except the annual cycle, of course, but that's hardly clever. But we can do long-range forecasts and also explain the ice ages. Okay, next one. Oh, before the next one, though. How much CO2 is there here? 0.4%. Almost right. What? That's about right, but it's 0.04%. So you're almost right, okay. So it's basically bugger all, and there's more argon around than CO2. Okay, next one. Yeah, so here you are, it tells you. And so that would be like 1.25 inches on top of Big Ben Tower if Big Ben Tower was the atmosphere, and man's contribution to that is only 4% of that, i.e. a bird dropping on the top of Big Ben Tower. So we're told to believe that a bird dropping on top of Big Ben Tower is going to control the whole of the tower. It is delusional nonsense. It is utter complete poppycock. And the so-called science behind it is fake. Okay. And of course, termites produce 10 times more CO2 than mankind, so I'm looking for the war on termites. Where is it, Joe Biden? Wake up. We want a war on termites. Okay. Next one. Quick look at long history, 600 million years. The relationship estimates from ice cores and sediments of average temperatures, this is the blue one, and CO2 is the black one. So there's not any kind of relationship where you can say that the CO2 is driving temperatures. And also notice that we are relatively cold now compared with many times in the past, and also it's quite a low CO2 level, in fact one of the lowest CO2 levels. But otherwise there's no relationship between them. Okay, next one. If you look at a slightly more detail, the last 400,000 years, and time goes this way here, you can see that this one is the carbon dioxide and this one is the temperatures. So Al Gore had this graph, and he marched in front of it and said, look, isn't it obvious? CO2 controls temperatures. It's clear, he says. Well, it's a lie, because if you look at the details, just even to look, first of all, there's a lot more variation in the temperatures than there is in the CO2. So how the hell can the CO2 be controlling something which has got more variation in it? But when you look at the detail, what he says is wrong. And just for information, this 43,000 year period in the tilt of the Earth, it wobbles like this. If that's the Earth spinning, it goes like this, you see, in 43,000 years, and the axis precesses in 26,000 years. So those things with magnetic links to the sun explain the ice ages. I just thought I'd pass that to you. All right, next one. Right, so if you look at more detail, time still going this way on this graph, Antarctic temperatures go like this, and CO2 levels go like that. So there's a lag. CO2 levels follow temperature changes. They're not causing them. So there's no evidence whatsoever for their theory. Completely none. Okay, next one. And if you look in the last 10,000 years, because between ice ages we have warm periods, and we went zip past some of those. Shall we zip past? Go back a few. That one, you see. You've got these warm periods. There's a warm period. There's a warm period, warm period, warm period, and so on, warm period. And all this stuff is ice age. So the natural way of the world, actually, most of the time in the last 500,000 years, is ice age. And we have these interglacial periods, and we're in one now. And they typically last 10,000 years. And we've had this last one going for 10,000 years. So that means we're due for a full ice age within 1,000 or 2,000 years. Anyway, okay, so move on to, we're looking at the details of the end of the last ice age, in fact. And you see, as I said, the CO2 follows temperatures, goes after the temperatures. All right, next one. And then you look at a bit more detail in the last 10,000 years, as I said. Well, you see, here we're in a sort of shortish warm period, and these are previous warm periods. and unfortunately haven't labelled them all, but this one, that's the Roman warm period, and they've all got names associated with various civilizations. But look, there's 10 of them in the last 10,000 years, typically every 1,000 years. This one is the coldest extra warm period within the current interglacial. So the idea there's something special happening now and it's getting warm is completely insane. There's no data to support that argument whatsoever. Okay, next one. And look at the last 100 years or 1,000 years in more detail. This is quite important to understand. So the top thing is Michael Mann's version of temperatures, which is fake. And this one is Tim Ball's graph, which the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, used to believe. But it didn't fit their narrative, so they deleted it and just created this thing. And there was a big court case recently between Michael Mann. He lost his libel case against Tim Ball for refusing to provide evidence that his infamous graph wasn't fraud. Because Tim Ball said in public that Michael Mann, who was he said he shouldn't be in Pennsylvania State University, he should be in the state pen. And that was taken to be libel. But Tim Ball won the libel case. Very interesting. So basically, judges have said, this stuff is crap, and what Tim Ball has said is true. And just as a kind of funny thing, I met Tim Ball in a conference in New York and had a chat to him about how he knew about the floods in 1953 in England. He said, "Oh, I was there." He said, "Oh, really? Where did you live?" He said, "Oh, I lived in Wiltshire." I thought, that's funny. I lived in Wiltshire. And he went to the same primary school as me. He was 10 when I was 5, but that was completely, I don't know what to say to that, but you find out things in New York, don't you? Okay, next one. Yes, a bit more detail of these things more recently. So we have these modern era is there, and we've got these cold winters, Dickens winters, little ice ages we call them, the spora minimum. The upper graph is solar activity. That's temperatures. And the upper graph, well, they both say temperatures, that can't be right. One of them is solar activity, the other one is temperature, but somehow they've both got marked as temperature because one of them is an equivalent, I think. Yes. Yeah, this one must be the solar activity. Anyway, low solar activity corresponds to, it is a smoothed out low solar activity, coldness. And that is because it moves the jet stream, that's the circulation pattern around the Earth, shifts it south, right? We needn't go into why, but that's what it does. And we'll just mention some of these things are quite interesting. This one here, 1348, that was the Black Death. And it doesn't show the details on the temperatures up there, but it was, that one is temperatures up there, was, there were dips in that which is just smoothed out, but that is quite interesting. But it was like to this very sharp what happened there. Suddenly low solar activity, lots of stuff going on, probably a comet around as well, and the Black Death. Okay. Bit technical, but if you look at data, then you can say, well, you can analyse any piece of data, any set of data, say, well, okay, that's got a 1-year cycle in, a 10-year cycle, a 22-year cycle, and so on. So you look at geomagnetic activity, that's the wobbles in the Earth's magnetic field caused by solar particles hitting the Earth's magnetic field. And you see the main signal of that is 11 years, which is this cycle of activity of the sun. However, the main temperature cycle on the Earth is not that, it's 22 years, or twice that one anyway. showing that the important thing about the solar activity is not just the activity, but the magnetic connection. And the Earth, the Sun's magnetic field flips round every 11 years. So it's a 22-year cycle. So there we have it. Okay, next one. Yeah, just a bit of detail up there. The if I go over here, it's easier. There we are. Temperatures, you see, fluctuate like this over the last century or so, and carbon dioxide levels have been going up continually. So the idea that CO2 is driving temperatures is completely insane. I mean, they say things like, oh yeah, well, since the Industrial Revolution it's got warmer. Well, you know, also the readership of the sun has gone up. I mean, lots of things have happened. But, you know, it's just insane to put that argument, because if the climate change story is to be worth anything, it has to be able to give you some prediction or so within weeks, months or years, and it can't do anything like that. Okay. There is basically in all climate a 60-year cycle, which is like the beats. You can imagine you've got these frequencies going on like music. You've got your 22-year magnetic cycle, and you've got something else which modulates it. Sorry, that's the 22-year cycle. Something else which modulates it is the moon's orbit crossing the orbit of the Earth, which is an 11-year, a 9.3 year in a half cycle, 18.6 years. So you can work out the beats between the two of those, and every 58 years you get these patterns repeating on average. And there is a very important 58-year signals in a lot of weather data, like 63 plus 58 is I believe 2000 and I don't know, somebody told me. But the time when the Thames last froze over, if I can remember rightly, I think it was 1963. And yeah, that is this year, that's right. 8, 9, 10, 11, that's right. Yeah, I was right. 12, yeah. So it's 2021. And that's what happened this February, if you recall. The Thames froze over at Teddington Weir, like it had in 1963. So a lot of these things happen under our predictions, and it's us who explained this. No one else has explained this before, this 58-year cycle. Okay, move on. We better speed up a bit or we're not going to get much time. Yeah, that's just about their nonsense predictions don't work. Okay, carry on. This is all their models say, wow, this is what's going to happen. Actual measurements of balloon measurements, this is what has happened. Okay, so it's again just nonsense. Okay, next one. Yeah, this is important. This Timo Neroma, a Finn, he was in the International Climate Skeptics email group in the sort of 90s and something like that, the late 90s anyway. And he pointed out that if you plot solar activity in 10 hail cycles apart, which is 221 years, a hail cycle is the 22-year or 22.1 year magnetic cycle, plot solar activity but separated by that, so 1600, 1821, and you see they go together, sort of. I mean, there's a lot of wobbling. But if there's any truth in that, we are here. We are here. And this is corresponding to that one, this one, was going to be 2031 or 2035. So we are definitely heading, I mean, there's no way you can argue about this really, we are heading for a world cooling, or certainly, well, especially in the temperate zones, northern hemisphere stuff. Because we know there is a smoothed out relationship, if you smooth out more than 22 years, between, or most timescales, smoothed out relationship between solar activity and world temperatures. Okay, next one. That's just to show you things are getting very low solar activity. Well, we've got to the new solar cycle now anyway, but we're now in solar cycle 24. You were here when this was first drawn. Okay, next one. Right, so how does it all happen? Well, it happens because of the jet stream and our predictions of changes in the jet stream. So this is the jet stream where, you know, above it you've got warmer, colder air, below it you've got warmer air. leave apart the polar jet is the one we're interested in. So we can make predictions of these changes using our understanding of solar activity, and basically when there's low solar activity, this thing moves south, and high, it moves north. So on average, that's what happens. So it's going to be warmer or colder, especially in the temperate zones when there's average low solar activity. Okay, next one. So this is how it all works. Put simply, and where's my pencil gone? Yeah, so you have solar activity, the rush of particles from the wind at 1,000,000 miles an hour upsets the Earth's magnetic field, the magnetosphere, which modifies the jet stream, changes circulation, and all that weather system makes different amounts of CO2 depending on, we can discuss how that works, but anyway, it's not CO2 causing weather and then causing the jet stream and then causing something in the ionosphere and then causing a solar flare. So if you drive fast around Pimlico, it doesn't mean there's going to be a solar flare following. So don't worry. Okay. What's this? I don't know. Something about mathematics. Let's move on. Right, so the key questions which we've contributed to world understanding of weather is what causes weather extremes and climate change, and the answer is changes in the jet stream. Question, what moves the jet stream, and the answer is caused by changes driven by solar particle magnetic activity and lunar modulation. And these shifts are largely predictable, which we can do. And I'll give you a bit of exciting forecast for this winter later on. Okay. Yeah, next one. Oh, yes, some of our proven successes. The Met Office were going completely berserk in 2007, 2008, 2009, saying we were going to have, you know, heat wave summers and all that. We said, no sizzling summers, there's going to be floods, we said. Here we are. That was 2007. Tewkesbury floods, 2008, 2009. So we were completely right and they were completely wrong. You should applaud that, by the way. You can do, okay, good. All right, next one, but it was very funny going on the TV with that. Oh, another one, you like this, December 2010. We said this is probably going to be the coldest December for 100 years. And a month later, David Cameron said in Parliament, this was the coldest December for 100 years. So it must be true. Okay. Quick round of applause for that. Now, in the middle of that, on the 15th of December or so, I was phoned by the BBC, and I was with some friends in the National Liberal Club. I don't go there often, but I happened to be there for the some climate people, actually. And I was phoned by the BBC and said, oh, Mr. Corbyn, would you care to come in the morning to the morning show to tell us about your prediction? I said, yeah, sure, but I don't think your boss is going to want me. And the girl, she was a new researcher, said, don't be ridiculous, Mr. Corbyn, of course we want you. I said, okay, thank you. We'll send a taxi, she said, all right. Wait for the call. So I waited for the call. 2 hours later, no call. So I phoned up. A different woman answered the phone and said, she said. I said, what's the problem? She said, I can't tell you. I said, well, come on, you can tell me. She said, all right. Someone else is coming instead. I said, oh, who's that? She didn't want to tell me that either. And she said, oh, it's the government's chief scientific advisor. I said, he knows FA. But I used the Queen's English version of FA. Namely, I said, fuck all, which she didn't like that very much. But anyway, that was the end of the conversation. And I haven't really been back on the BBC since then. Okay. Next one, but that was quite exciting, that. And at that time, Boris Johnson was phoning me up every other day saying, what's going to happen, this and that, you know, what about the Olympics in 2 years' time and all that stuff. And I did warn him about heavy rain at the start of the Olympics. But now he's gone completely believing this gob shite, which is appalling. Anyway, just some examples of cold bits when we said, so let's move on. Next one. Yeah, some of the forecasts we make have been, obviously I choose the ones which have been most accurate, but on average they are accurate and statistically very significant. But this one, a very good map there. You see, that was a long-range map, high pressure there, and this heat going up there, and here's what actually happened, you know, which is remarkable on the 22nd to 25th of June 2018, which, if you recall, was a hot summer. Okay, next one, Arctic ice getting thicker. It's now got to be extended, but it is getting thicker and thicker every year. In fact, now a good way of measuring actual climate is by the extent of Arctic ice in the spring, the furthest extent. Because, of course, they lie about the actual temperatures, but, you know, the ice is there on a map taken by satellite, so they can't change that. And it is actually getting bigger and bigger every year. And, of course, there's going to be feedback mechanisms, which I don't think we've got the graph of that. But more Arctic ice, extending more in the spring, means the reflection of the sun's rays in the spring is greater, and it goes back into space instead of warming the Earth. So next year round, it'll be longer. So you get a positive feedback of runaway cooling, and we're actually entering that now, and there's a very extreme cold happening in Russia and Green and so forth at this point in time. Okay, next one. That's some details about North Atlantic getting colder, so move on. Been some very big cold blasts in Australia, apart from the politics. Next one. Right. So what's happened to all this climate stuff? Well, first of all their measures do not reduce CO2. They claim to reduce CO2, but they don't reduce CO2. When they've moved steel production from Teesside to India, they haven't reduced CO2. They've taken your money, given it to Tata Steel, to take the stuff out of the country and build a steel plant there, which produces just as much CO2 as the one in Teesside. So the mechanism is to destroy industry in Britain, collaborated and organised by the European Union Emission Trading Scheme. Evil industrial destruction con. So the economic effects are catastrophic. But, you know, the leaders of these countries are presiding over the destruction of their own economies. That's what's happening. And we have instead a casino economy. And, of course, what they do pushes up energy and oil prices, because that's what to cooperate with it, the oil companies require oil prices to be maintained. And they say, I don't know if that's on the next slide actually, maybe. Can you go on the next slide? Oh yes, no, it is. No, back, it is there. Come back. Yes. Right. What they said was, the oil companies, just go to their websites, they said, we support man-made climate change policies, providing there's a uniform price for carbon is maintained across the board. Okay, so that means when a farmer is going to be paid enough money to burn food instead of people eating it, burn maize and turn it into fuel, or ethanol, which they're shoving into petrol now, he's got to be paid enough. He's got to be paid more, at least, than he's going to get by people eating corn on the cob. So the price of energy has to go up for that, and the governments have to work to maintain it, or they make false shortages or whatever when you know about all those. So that is what the oil companies get out of it. They cooperate completely. Look, because it's a no-brainer. They're going to lose 2% of their sales to mad processes like ethanol or biodiesel or wind farms. Tops of 5%. And they double their profit on the other 95% of energy production. So it's a complete no-brainer. And the rector, or they renamed them president of Imperial College, she was criticised by Extinction Rebellion for getting a grant from Chevron. I don't know what she said, but quite frankly, there's no contradiction between Imperial College preaching rubbish about CO2 and her getting a huge deal from Chevron, because Chevron are doing the same thing. They're all doing the same thing. It is completely consistent to work with oil companies and produce the CO2 con. They are one and the same. So, but she lost her job for that. I think, or maybe she was going anyway. Next one. Right. So, sometimes you think you get these stories on TV. Oh, experts say this, experts say that. So I just want to show you this picture. It's about equations in physics. Doesn't it look like an equation in physics? No. Okay. What's the time, by the way? So we've got to finish in 10 minutes, this section. All right. So water here is going uphill. You can see it. There it is. And it comes down again. It goes uphill. So easy. It's obvious, isn't it? Water flows uphill in these circumstances. However, I mean, if you try to make this out of bricks, it wouldn't fit together. So it is an optical illusion. Right. And the point is, in physics, you can do all sorts of things with arrows on diagrams, especially. So, oh, yes, this does this, blah, 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 blah. And there's an equation somewhere which sorts it. But those things, well, when it comes to climate, they are lies. I'm just showing you, see. You can represent things. See, this is a three-dimensional object represented in two dimensions. And if you simplify physics of, complicated equation into some little thing, then of course you can make things up. And there's lots of other things in physics where you can misrepresent reality. Okay, next one. Right, so we were told 97% of world scientists believed in man-made CO2. Therefore, it must be true, or man-made climate change. Well, actually, first of all, even if they all believed it, it doesn't make it true, because you've got to have evidence to make anything true. But actually, the claims themselves were completely false. Because all this was that 97% of certain set of scientific papers mention climate change in the headline or the abstract because they want the funding, so they put that in there. But when you read the paper, it didn't have any justifications for man-made climate change, except in about 0.3% of them. Okay, so that was just a lie, but it's a commonly held belief. All right, next one. Yeah, we've gone through that, really. No evidence of in the real world. That's right, we've done that. Okay, next one. Yes, to understand the importance of the sea, well, this is quite important to get this, and then we can kind of round off. In the sea, there's 50 times more CO2 dissolved than there is in the air. So we're told, okay, you burn things and you get more CO2 in the air, that's going to go in the ocean and make it more acid. Well, it's utter bullshit, because there's loads of CO2 in there. If you put all the CO2 in the atmosphere into the sea, it would increase it by 2%. Well, this isn't going to be a big deal in a buffer solution. It's insane, completely insane. And in fact, there's an equilibrium of the CO2 in the air and the sea, but it depends on the temperature of the sea. When the sea is warmer, CO2 comes out. If you put too much CO2 in the air, it'll just go into the sea. That's where it goes. So man cannot control the amount of CO2. He can produce as much CO2 as he wants, but if the sea's cold enough, it'll just take it all. All right, next one. We don't want to get too involved in this, but this theory of these arrows doing this or that is false. That isn't what happens. They say, okay, surface here, extra, well, the CO2 sends back extra heat or something, right? Well, without going into details, we know it must be rubbish, because the upper atmosphere is colder than down here. So they're saying you put extra CO2 up there, and that radiation, extra radiation, is going to send more heat downwards. So therefore it's going to get warmer down on the ground. Well, okay, so the whole net effect is heat being moved from a colder region in the upper atmosphere to below. Well, that's nonsense. That's against thermodynamics. It's against the second law of thermodynamics. Heat does not flow from a cold body to a hot body. Any moron knows that. Even the most stupid Extinction Rebellion morons agree with you, but actually they believe the opposite. Anyway, they must watch kettles and hope they're going to boil. It would save electricity bills, wouldn't it? But so it's false physics. I mean, if you want to know what is really going on, these any level of any radiation, any radiating thing, it emits and absorbs exactly the same amount in each direction anyway. So this stuff is all completely delusional. That theory, and that is told to children, of course. Now, I was at the Russian Academy of Sciences in 2004, where the Met Office were there putting this forward, And I said to the guys in the break, I said, look guys, this is just bullshit and you know that. And he said, yes, but that's what we teach in schools. That's what he said to me. I said, yes, but this is the Russian Academy of Sciences. And that terminated the conversation. But that's crazy, you know. Anyway, let's go on. Now, there is a better theory they have, which we're going to talk about now. This one is that, first of all, their misrepresentation. If you've got a bottle which contains extra CO2 and one with less CO2 in, and you shine a light into those, the one with the extra CO2 will warm up quicker than the one without, okay? Because it's a better absorber of excess heat. So that's what happens. But then what happens next? Does this one always stay warmer? Well, think about it. See what happens next. The answer is it doesn't, you see. They're going to reach the same temperature. This one warms up quicker. And when you turn off the heat, the radiation, we have a light in front of some bottles, you can do this. This one cools quicker. That's all that happens. So they confuse rate of temperature change with temperature itself. It's complete bullshit. Okay, next one. And if what they said was true, then of course you'd get this magic extra temperature, which is a violation of the second law of thermodynamics. So that can't be done. Okay, so carry on. We'll have to do this a bit quick. That just says it's a violation of second law of thermodynamics. There's another version, right. As you go up in the atmosphere, it gets colder. Okay, and this is a sensible argument they put. It doesn't work, but it's a proper argument, and it's the only one they've got. But they don't put this on television because it's too difficult for the public to be lied to. So you've got this, as you go up in the atmosphere, the temperature goes down. So this is how temperature falls, if you like, as you go up in the atmosphere. Does that make sense? So that's height. Yeah, that's right. So higher up, it's a lower temperature. You see? Lower temperature there. Okay. Now, they say, well, okay, the temperature of the atmosphere is going to be determined by how much can escape into space, energy escaping into space from the outer edges of the atmosphere. Because when there's less absorbers of radiation higher up, then the level at which radiation can escape goes up. Okay, so it's got to be, if there's a lot of CO2 around or water vapor, then where radiation can escape from, which we would describe as the upper level of the atmosphere, goes up. Okay? Now, if you've got this lapse rate, i.e. the fall in temperature with height, you just extend that line. So you say, okay, if that level goes up in height, this is going to be warmer. So it would make the ground warmer. Interesting. So that is their actual theory. But it doesn't work because they leave out day-night cooling. This is like a static view, as again, anything in physics. Simplify it enough and you can fool anybody. So that's what they do. There's also arguments, is this line going to move like that or not? And there's lots of stuff. In fact, many arguments mean it's not like that. But the key thing to understand is on the next slide. That you see, if something's radiating, the radiation goes as the fourth power of the temperature. So you've got an oscillating temperature. This in my hand now is temperature high, temperature low. So the fourth power of this, averaged with the fourth power of that, is bigger than the fourth power of the mean, right? That sounds clever, doesn't it? But 7-year-olds can do things to the fourth these days, can't they? Actually, no, they can't. But anyway. 1, 2, and 3. 1 to the fourth plus 3 to the fourth is 1 plus 81, which is 82, and you halve that, you get 41. 2 to the fourth is 16. Okay, which is less than 41. So you can see how it works. So a fluctuating temperature in the upper atmosphere will cause more radiation. If there's more CO2 or water vapor in there, it will fluctuate more. So that should lead to a cooling in the upper atmosphere. Now they had a theory, they said, oh yeah, extra CO2, it's all coming, there's going to be a warm spot above the equator in the upper atmosphere. And they measured it. Well, they tried to measure it. This is the calculation that tells you about these temperatures, but anyway, go on. This is their theory. There would be a hot spot above the equator. This is what they measured. A cold spot. So I think you should applaud them. That's what we said. So I put this to some of them. Richard Linson, who's a lukewarmist. So he sort of believes there might be a little tiny effect, Piers, but that's partly to keep his job, I think. But, you know, he's actually a great guy. He just said, well, perhaps the data's wrong, perhaps the data's wrong. But nobody has come up with any data other than this. Okay. Next one. No, that's their fraudulent whatever. Actually, CO2's gone up, temperature's gone down, but then they changed all the data. So, next one. Yeah, the way they changed the data is quite clever, really. And you can find these online. They record, you find this stuff, the actual reported temperatures. But when they tell you what the averages are, they give you something else. They just add stuff on to the averages, put it in a computer and make some corrections, blah, blah, blah. So that's just for propaganda purposes. And when they talk about temperatures in the day, they always talk about, oh, hot, 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 and they don't talk much about cold, cold, cold. It's just a slow drip, drip brainwashing. Okay, next one. Actual lies amount to about 0.5 degree C warming at least when they've changed data sets successively. I won't go into this, but I remember somebody working with me and she got a new data set from the University of East Anglia and she said it's different. I said, what do you mean it's different? It can't be different. It could be updated with the latest month or year on it. But no, it's different, she said. It's different. And we looked at it, it was different. They've been changing the data sets systematically, having some corrections. And these are successive data sets shown there, and basically they added at least 0.5 degree on world temperatures. Probably more, but anyway, that's a minimum. Okay. Right, so what did they tell us? There'd be world runaway warming? Nope, the world's got colder. Droughts and heat waves in the UK? No, we've had floods. End of snow by 2010. They actually said 2010. Well, there we are. That was the best date they could have chosen, really. More American hurricanes? No, there's been less. I mean, everything they said has turned out to be a lie. But still they persist. Okay. Next one. I'm sure we've done that already. We have. It appears twice to remind you. So we're moving into now a mini ice age, or a little ice age. We called it mini ice age because it always was little ice age is the official description, but Boris Johnson started saying mini ice age, so we did that, but I think we should revert away from him now and go back to little ice age. Anyway, we predicted various things, but very large amplitude swings in the jet stream, giving cold blasts, warm blasts, and that is exactly what has happened. And just to show you, these things have happened before, and people like talking about the Great Fire of London, I recall recently. The Great Fire of London of 1666, and I know you're all in 66 mode, these people here, but anyway, that was preceded by the Belgian wind, which is a hot wind coming from Belgium. Belgium used to be further south, by the way. It was in northern France, basically. But a hot east wind coming from Belgium. It went on for 3 weeks. So London was totally parched and ready for somebody to light. They didn't have matches then, did they? I don't know what they did, but anyway. To light a fire, which what was probably done. But the point was, it was oscillating hot and cold spells, because those are things you got in some summers. The Belgian wind of a super hot spell, which led to the Great Fire, with some help. And we had also very cold spells. That was in the middle of the Maunder minimum, this period, you see. And the Thames was frozen over regularly in those years. Okay, so we just go past all of this stuff. Okay, let's go on. The politics of it all, yes. I mentioned this Russian Academy of Sciences, but we don't want to spend too long on all this stuff. But I'll tell you this, because you'll be quite excited, I suppose. I was invited to the Global Oil Summit in 2004, where I met, on Andrei Ilyanov, who subsequently invited me to the Russian Academy of Sciences, where the Met Office had been invited to come there, and the Russians then had decided that they didn't believe in man-made climate change, and they weren't going to listen to the Met Office. The Met Office were going to come to a conference to tell the Russians to sign the Kyoto Protocol. And Andrei Ilyanov, who was Putin's chief scientific advisor, invited me and 4 other scientists from around the world, including the Richard Lindzen I mentioned, who's from America. And we were there before the Met Office turned up. So Andrei Ilyanov phoned up the Met Office when they were at Heathrow Airport. This is what he says to us anyway. He said, I told them that you were there, you and your friends were there, Piers. And they said, we're not coming then. And he said to us, he said, but I knew they would. And sure enough, they turned up and they were fuming. They were fucking really annoyed. And they kept disrupting the meeting and all sorts of stuff. But we made jokes at them and said, look, and I had these little graphs and said to Sir John Houghton, wouldn't this be convenient if one of these was CO2 and the other was temperatures? And he's not normally lost for words, and he just sat there saying nothing because he knew that they're talking bollocks. But anyway, that's what happened. So the RAS meeting agreed that man-made climate change was bollocks and that they were not going to sign the Kyoto Protocol. Okay, that's fine. This was about July 2004, I think. Russian Academy of Sciences rejects that, right? And they're meant to be advising Putin. So then, September, I turn on the TV and there's Putin signing the Kyoto Protocol. I thought, what the fuck is going on here? So I phoned up the Russians. I said, excuse me, what's going on? We agreed, you agreed, everybody agreed. It's all bollocks science anyway, isn't it? He said, yes, Mr. Corbyn. I said, well, what's the problem then? He said, Beslan. I said, what? He said, Beslan. He said it again. And they said, I've got to go. So he went. What? Well, Beslan. What was Beslan? Beslan was that place in Chechnya where there was a school occupied, and it was stormed by the Russians against the Chechen rebels, and there were lots of people killed. What's that got to do with anything? That was his answer. Well, a few weeks later, after this conversation, the Russians were in Chechnya killing, and the West said nothing. So, my conclusion is, no one's told me this, of course they wouldn't. Who would tell me anything like that? They did some sort of deal that, we'll sign this nonsense and you can get on with what you want, providing we've got our own way in our backyard. Okay? So, just when you see things happening on a world scale, don't think that the reasons given are anything like the real reasons. Okay, well that was exciting, wasn't it? Yes, all right, we've got to read quickly. Where did it all come from? The Club of Rome, these little nasty groups of nasty people cooked up the idea of global warming or anything. We can have anything to brainwash people. Anyway, let's go on. This is going on a bit, isn't it? Yes. They admitted at various meetings that actually there's no truth in it anyway. One has to free oneself from the illusion the international climate policy is environmental policy. This is what they say. This is Edenhofer, the co-chair of Working Group 3 of the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And that was in 2010, just before that super cold spell. All right, next one. Yeah, we've told that already, basically. There's quite a nice little graph here somewhere. We've done most of that. Let's go on. We've done that. There's a graph on that one next somewhere. Yes, here we are, the graph. You see, this is the renewable energy revolution. It's this poxy little strip here. This is meant to give you the need to be locked down in a climate lockdown or whatever. It's bollocks. It's complete bollocks. This is, I don't know which is which. This is oil. This one is natural gas. That's hydroelectricity. That's coal. Nuclear is one of these, perhaps that one. Yeah. So, this is never going to get very big. It's all complete poppycock. What they claim is nonsense. They're never going to have anything. It's just impossible. There's not enough minerals in Africa to make all these insane wind farms they want. It necessitates the total rape of Africa anyway, apart from the young boys dying going down these horrible holes. Anyway, next one. Yeah, that's all just stuff, but just to say electric cars are what's the word? They're like statements, political statements for the morons people have got more money than sense drive electric cars anyway, because they produce more CO2 per mile than other things, because you've got to have a power station to produce the electricity, and that's inefficiency, and so on. Okay, what have we got to do? Well, we've got to destroy all those sacred cows. We've got to advance real science, and I think we're almost getting to the end, where I modified an extra slide. Next one. What have you got to do? You've got to enjoy life. That's the first thing you've got to do, not feel guilty about driving a car. In fact, accept that man can't change climate, stop all this carbon reduction nonsense. But I mean, there are some good things in green policies, if you like, when it comes to defending biodiversity. Then, we do that. And we're against smoke pollution. Okay? Right, that's just problems of physics as they are now, so we'll leave that behind. Right. What now? We've got to destroy the New World Order. Okay, we'll come on to some of these things, but just to sort of summarise. There is a developing mini ice age. The world will get colder. This will be a driver for energy crisis. Now, question, can rational debate end the unstable, ever-increasing concentration of wealth on the super-rich and I meant to put NWO, New World Order Project, sorry. Well, the answer to that is no, of course. Rational debate does not decide anything when it comes to economics and profits and what the New World Order want. So just, don't have that illusion. Of course, we engage in rational debate to convince people, but in the end, of course, it's going to be action, taking over, well, many things. Sorry. As Orwell said, in a society based on lies, speaking the truth is a revolutionary act. Sorry.
The last bit you said, sorry.
Ah.
Concerned about action, what we must do.
Oh, I see. Yes. Well, academic debate is insufficient. That's what I'm saying, because they lie and they don't adhere to logic, as you well know. So it comes to the important thing is going to be action, taking things over, changing people's ideas and outlook. And we'll talk more about that a bit later on. But what we've got to fight for, and this covers the climate and the COVID, is fighting for proper accountability and evidence-based approach and honesty in science and politics. And after the break, we'll talk about that. So I'll end with that statement. Accountability in science and politics. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Why does nobody mention that the whole of the universe is in climate change, as in their climates are changing?
Yes.
So, but nobody properly mentions that, do they?
No, they don't, but you're right. Well, you mean in the solar system, the climate's on...
Andrew Johnson states it a lot, and
it's good.
It's obvious that Hubble has actually showed it. NASA knows about it, but nobody talks about it.
Good point. Thank you very much. Yeah. See, there's climate change happening on Venus and Jupiter because of the changing solar activity.
Have you got anything to say about the ability of the powers that be to change short-term things via weather modification and all these satellites are putting up? Do you know?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. There is weather modification going on. Mostly, it is experimental. They don't have the ability to change weather a lot, but they would like that. They have built more HARP things. They put microwaves projected into the ionosphere and reflected back and so on. There's new HARP facilities in Wiltshire now. So that has been ramped up. Where that's going to go, I don't know. They have been spreading more stuff in the atmosphere. They seem to spread stuff over towns that are full of working class people they don't like.
Who controls the heart? Guys.
I don't know. I presume it's part of the Ministry of Defence, but I don't know actually.
Piers.
I've assumed that, but good point. Good question. Better write that down.
Sorry, can I ask?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, do it.
As CO2, I believe, is slightly heavy in an air,
Yeah,
and presumably most of it is produced on the planet's surface.
yeah.
What is the mechanism that takes it into the upper atmosphere?
Well, it's just diffusion. It's mixture. I mean,
But it's-
wind and just wind and convection. Yeah,
So
yeah,
if
yeah.
it's windless, it stays where it is?
Well, it's never windless anyway.
Well, it is sometimes on a
Yeah.
windless day.
Not
I mean,
so.
I'd say
True, yeah. No, fair enough, but it is well mixed. Well, there's other, there's oxygen, nitrogen, argon, and so on. They've all got different densities.
Always fall to the planet's surface.
No, it
does
doesn't.
It doesn't.
You can get high concentrations of CO2 in very quiet valleys. You can get that. Yeah.
It's heavy in an air.
Yes. Well, it's yeah.
The global CO2 measurements are taken on the top of a volcano in Hawaii.
They are. Yeah.
Volcanoes, by their very nature,
Well.
produce carbon dioxide. It's a silly place.
Well, it's the silliest place in the world to measure it. So maybe their measurements are not real there anyway. But there are other measurements around the world of CO2 levels in different places, and you can get. Well, are they real maps of CO2 concentration and how they fluctuate day and night and so on? So there are other measures, but the Mauna Loa measurements, I would say, are largely fudged. My friend Peter Gill, another physicist, he says they're, well, not entirely bullshit, but he's very suspicious of them. How they just conveniently go up all the time instead of, there should be more random fluctuations in them logically. But you're right, having it on a volcano is stupid. Yep.
If we're heading into this imminent ice age, what's your prediction for UK winter temperatures? How cold?
Well, it'll go down by about 2 or 3 degrees in the temperate zones.
Not drastic then, not drastic.
Well, it depends what you mean, but that is quite cold for a lot of people.
Winter.
Well, if it goes down 2 degrees in here, I'll be annoyed. But I'll tell you something about this winter, shall I? That'll excite you. There is going to be more snow, we said, because the jet stream's wilder and there's a lot more stuff in the Arctic, cold stuff, and that is happening. More snow has been happening in the north. I don't know if you've noticed, but in Yorkshire they've been having snow. Well, let me finish that. And we got a specific prediction about a North Sea storm surge. They happen not very often. There was one in 1953, 1976 and 2013 where there was a northwest wind over the North Sea followed by some very active low pressure systems zooming in, and we've been having some recently, and we're saying that at the end of end of January there's going to be one of these, a very deep one, and that will make a big surge of water in the North Sea, which will make floods or potential floods in the northeast coast and in Netherlands. Well, they'll put the Thames barrier up and scream climate change, but will London flood? Probably not, but it would be exciting if it did, wouldn't it? As long as they don't come to my flat. I'm on the second floor, yes. I don't care about these ground floor people. Well, in Fulham, yeah, you would go actually. And Macy would help you. It's the flood, isn't it? Yeah, okay.
Yes, is there a geopolitical drive behind the climate development? And
completely.
would you agree with me that at the time of the Club of Rome forecast in the 70s, it was all about upsetting the Middle East oil barons and saying, we're consuming too much oil, we'll really have to cut back. That was driven by the Israeli lobby. I think the same thing is happening now.
No, although what you say is correct. You see, what's happening now is a bit different. They've got the ideology that holds up oil price, so everybody's on board with it, oil companies as well. But it's also used, the prime reason now is to lock you down. It's a mental control to make you do anything. And it is very much embedded in all international things, all their thinking. Schools are teaching it all the time. It's accepted as the norm in every university. you know, and it is utter bollocks, yes. The IPCC and the United Nations are all in this together. The IPCC is not a scientific body, it's a government setup, and the officials in it are all government appointees, and they tell scientists what they've got to say. When they,
I think the whole thing makes no sense if you understand the difference between petroleum and fossil fuels. One of the biggest lies I think
good point, I know what you're going to say.
Is that fossil fuels, like the world, coal is a fossil fuel.
Correct.
Petroleum is something different.
Absolutely right.
It's not a result of dead organic matter.
Perfectly right, excellent. It comes from much deeper down, and it's probably been continually produced all the time. So there's never going to be an oil shortage, not in a million years.
So Piers,
Yes, sir.
they report finding fossil fuels on other planets, particularly on the moons of Saturn and Jupiter. You know?
When they say that, do they mean oil or do they mean coal?
I don't know. Organic fossil fuels. They call them.
Yeah.
Which
They're probably trying to justify sending rockets there to collect it. How about that? Imagine the loss benefit analysis on that would be insane. But you know, interesting. I don't know. Obviously, if Mars had been, you know, plants on it a long time ago, there would be maybe coal. But coal doesn't form that easily. You know, there's no coal being forming now because the rate at which stuff is you know. Right now, trees collapse, die, rot, and then they get eaten, and CO2 is produced into the atmosphere. They don't lay down coal measures. That doesn't happen.
No,
now, under the current
the way I understand it, all the coal
climate.
was laid down before the fungus was there to decompose it.
You may be right, but I'm not an expert on that. You're right. Okay, if you say so. Okay. Yes. All right. Is it break time? No.
One question?
Yep.
I remember about 10 years ago there was a thing called Climate Gate coming out of
University of East Anglia.
I just wondered what your experience of that was, what came out.
Well, my experience of that was interesting. About 2 years before that, I visited the University of East Anglia and upset them all by saying, look, what you're saying, guys, there's no evidence for it. And they were really annoyed. And I got interviewed on the BBC for having a different view. Whereas now, you certainly wouldn't be interviewed for having a different view. Anyway, then we had what was called Climategate, you're right. And somebody leaked information of emails which showed they were, what they said, hiding the decline. It was a decline in temperatures between something and something, you know. And I could find the graphs, but it'd take too long to argue about it. So they were hiding the decline of temperatures when they'd assumed they could model temperatures using a thing called bristlecone pines, which were pine trees with tree rings in and all that. So, and they found, oh shit, if we go on using these, it's just going to show it's getting colder and colder. So, oh my God, we can't do this. So they worked out, and emails between them said, now we can hide the decline, where they're going to just chop off this bit of data and add on another one. Okay, very convenient. And that's what they did, and this got exposed. And they were very annoyed, but then more emails were revealed. They had avalanches of emails, and one of them said, we are never going to allow the likes of Piers, Corbyn and his friends to publish anything in any respectable, peer-reviewed scientific publications. That was in the emails. And the same people were saying to me, oh Piers, look, you can do all this forecasting, why don't you tell us how it's done? Why don't you get it published? So they were going to have me trying to publish things and then refuse it. And then say, it had been refused. Yeah, you know what I mean? Oh, bullshit. No. So I will publish lots of stuff in due course, but I've been busy doing other things recently.